Welcome those folks that are joining in. We're really glad that each and every single one of you are here. Got a few folks joining in. It is almost 9 o'clock. Time to begin in just a moment, but we're glad that you're here. Hope this time is good for each of you, and hope that you'll engage with me through maybe some Q&A at the end, and some fun conversation. Stefan, good to see you. It's just you so far, but you know. All right. Webinar chat should be live, Q&A should be live, and so hope that your day is off to a good start. I guess it's the middle of the day, East Coast time. I'm going to go ahead and begin. I really want to make sure that we have a high impact, engaging time. Most of all, I want this to be useful to you. We've all been in meetings where you walk away from that meeting not knowing what the point of that meeting was. I never want to do that. I want to drive and drive hard on this topic. This topic is so important to me, but before we jump into it, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jason Hodges, and I'm a founder of the Barzel Group. Barzel is Hebrew for iron sharpens iron. We love leaders, we love organizations, and we love coming alongside to do whatever it takes to help sharpen those leaders, sharpen those teams, and sharpen those organizations. That's why we exist. This is our first webinar, so welcome to the first ever online webinar. Really glad that you're taking some time to be with us. We hope this time is encouraging, challenging, and most of all, that you walk away with something that will help you shape your leadership, shape your team, shape your organization. But in a different context, one of the guys I used to love to read, Edwards, he used to say, but before you preach something on the mountaintops, you have to preach it to yourself. And so I hope that this is sharpening for you as a leader, because we can easily go to the team, go to somebody else. Oh, they need to hear this. This is why this problem exists. But I really hope that what you take today changes you. I really hope that what you hear today challenges you. Again, I'm Jason. My wife's Rachel. We've been married for 20 years. We have two teenage boys, and we live in the Green Mountains state of Vermont. I do like long walks on the beach, but I also really like the mountains. That's why I live there. I used to always say that I like long walks on the beach, but I'm like, wait, I live in the mountains. I guess I have to say that too, even though I do prefer the beach. Listen, today you signed up for a webinar called Why You Think You're Clear, but your team doesn't think you are. Why you think you're clear, but your team doesn't think you are. Man, this is so challenging. I truly believe that one of the greatest leadership challenges we have is the challenge of clarity. And the reason I say that is because I have felt the pain of not being clear. I've also felt the pain of thinking that I was clear when someone else doesn't think so. We could go into a million stories, and we will, a few today that I'll share, but you could even tell your own stories, the pain of not having clarity. But man, if we look at the inverse of that, there's such joy, there's such energy, there's such momentum when you find clarity, because clarity leads to alignment, and alignment leads to momentum. And there's momentum, and there's synergy in an organization, in a team, in a marriage, in a relationship when there's clarity. But without clarity, we have chaos. And I know that's what you want to avoid. The challenge of clarity, we're going to go into deep stories today, and we're going to hopefully share a lot of good content that you can take away. Some of this content will just pierce the heart. Some of this content will pierce your history, because you remember what it was like to have that challenge, what it was like to face that challenge. But we really hope that today's encouraging for you. So today, just to share with you a couple of things, what I do want you to do is I want you to engage in the chat. I also want you to engage in the Q&A along the way. I will check the Q&A, and if I miss your question, I want to make sure to hit your question either at the very end or even in a personal one-on-one follow-up. Here at the Barzel Group, not just me, but my partner Jay and all of our team members, we love waking up every single day helping leaders. And we love waking up every single day helping organizations. I'm working on a little book project, and part of this content will come from the book project. And right now, the working title is Leadership Sucks. Now, like, wait, this is supposed to be encouraging. This is supposed to be engaging. Why that title? But the reality is, and you feel it, leadership sucks the life out of us. And I have been writing a lot about the challenge of why leadership is like a cup with a hole in the bottom. And that hole in the bottom is the people you lead. The hole in the bottom is the challenge of leadership. And it's just a constant drain when you're in charge. There's a constant drain when you're responsible. There's a constant drain when you get the text, you get the phone calls, you get the knock on the doors. So how do we plug that hole? One of the biggest holes that we have in the teams that we lead is clarity. And so today, I got a long list to share with you, and I hope that you're ready to either write it down on paper, take some digital notes, take some notes. I love Evernote. I have thousands and thousands of files. I think I'm close to 10,000. And I search that bad boy all the time because I'm looking for past notes on certain topics. So no matter what your note-taking form is, I hope that you will write it down. In fact, one of the last things I'll share today is if it's not written down, it's going to be really hard to be clear. The other preface before I start and jump into the presentation today is, listen, we've all dropped the ball on this challenge. It's going to be so easy for you as a leader to hear something and go, oh, I know, that reminds me of Paul. Oh, I know, that reminds me of a guy I used to work with, Tom. Okay. Oh, that reminds me of one of my last teammates, Christy. Can I tell you, don't go to other people's names first. Go to you. Really reflect deeply on your leadership. Even as I was preparing this, it was easy for me to think about the Paul, the Tom, the Christy. It was easy for me to say, oh, yeah, he was guilty of this. Oh, I wish she would have done better at that. I'm preaching this to myself today, and I hope that you'll do the same thing. You got to do some self-checking today, because when there's not clarity, someone has to own it. And if you're a leader, you own the challenge of clarity. So I want you to dive down deep into your own story. I want you to dive down deep into your own leadership. I have to remove some names and situations and details from some of the stories today, in the event that this is shared, right, and or listened to by them. But a friend of mine was fired from an organization about 12 years ago. Gifted, gifted at relationships. Gifted. There's no one that I know that didn't like him. I just won't even use his name. There's no one that didn't just like him, but love him. A brilliant strategist, a brilliant connector. When I think about Donald Clifton's Strength Finders, oh my gosh, connectedness, strategist. What's the other Strength Finders? Wu, the ability to influence and use his charisma to get people towards action, was second to none. But after about 5 years in this organization, they had to fire him, and they fired him for one reason. And they told him, they said, this sounds kind of crazy, because we love you, we believe in you, you've done a good job here, you've not done a poor job, but the only reason that we have to let you go is because we don't know where you want to take us. When they started to boil that down, it was clarity. I mean, the worst case situation of clarity is not just chaos, but that you can't lead anybody because no one knows where you're going. They see you going, but they don't know where you're going. I'm like, wow. And in part of his story, he tells to this day, I was fired because I couldn't provide clarity. I haven't heard that too much. I hear a lot of other firing stories. This is a big deal. Not just internal chaos, but the inability for you to lead because you can't get clear. I'm going to share my screen, and I want to take you through first the 7 reasons that you think you're clear. Starting a broadcast here. So you're going to see this on screen share. Okay. Why you think you are clear, but your team doesn't think so. I have 7 reasons why you think you're clear. Remember, the first rule, don't go to anyone else. Just do some self-evaluation. And you know how self-evaluation works. Self-evaluation is only self-evaluation. You're going to need to evaluate your own leadership through other people. This is the power of 360 reviews. This is the power of asking your team to give you clarity. The 7 reasons that you think you're clear are here. Number 1, because you were clear. Now, I love this one because the reality of like why you think that you're clear, because maybe you were. And this is one of the simplest ways, and this is the first thing I thought of that I wanted to share. The reason you think that you were clear is because you really were. You said it plainly. You were not confusing. You didn't mumble on forever. You said what you needed to say, and you said it clearly. Now, just because, and you know this, just because you say it doesn't mean it sticks. And this is why this is number 1. The other night, my son will not be listening to this. This isn't really throwing him under the bus. This is just normal teenage stuff. I go downstairs in our Vermont home, and I'm like, honey, where's Josiah? She's like, I don't know. I was like, the garage is open and the four-wheeler's gone. She's like, what? I'm like, it's in the middle of the night. What are you doing? So we track him on his iPhone, and we live in the beautiful Green Mountain state of Vermont. Beautiful creeks nearby us, incredible four-wheeling paths. He just doesn't leave in the middle of the night. And so I texted him, like, where are you? He goes, I'm down by the river. I'm like, but why are you down by the river? He's like, because I just wanted to enjoy a night by the river. I'm like, you didn't say anything to us about where you were gone. So he gets back. I give him a hug. I'm like, I love you, but you're not allowed to leave in the middle of the night on the four-wheeler. He goes, I didn't know that. I'm like, Josiah, come on, man. You know that you're not allowed to leave in the middle of the night. He says, no, I didn't. I said, okay. I think that was pretty clear before, but just because I was clear before doesn't mean it sticks. And so I said, hey, can I just give you a heads up? If the sun is down, you're not allowed to leave on the four-wheeler. He goes, okay. I give him a hug. I tell him I love him. And he goes upstairs. Just because you're clear doesn't mean it's going to stick. And so you can't be frustrated by other people when it doesn't stick, because it's just the nature of the human challenge that we have. Just because you're clear doesn't mean it's going to stick. Number 2, the 7 reasons you think you're clear. Number 2 is because it's clear to you. Now, this is a crazy assumption, but this is like so obvious, and some of these are so obvious, but we can't let the obvious derail us. Just because it's clear to you doesn't mean it's going to be clear to them. 2 Stanford brothers, Chip and Dan Heath, that were professors at Stanford years ago, wrote a book called Made to Stick, a classic. Please write this down. A classic book on sticky communication, as they would call it. Why do some things stick and others don't? One of the reasons that they wrote about in the book is the curse of knowledge. The problem is that when we know something, the human brain automatically assumes that the other person knows it. This is true of traffic rules. You're driving down the road and you think everyone's clear that cars should do the following. Here's how they should pass. Here's how they should use their blinker. But just because you're aware of something doesn't mean that everyone else is aware of it. So the more something is familiar to you, the bigger you assume, and the more that you assume, it's familiar to everyone else. And so it's easy to come into the room and say, well, I understand this, and they're going to understand it too. That's a wrong assumption. We have to convince ourselves in our brain that my audience does not understand what I'm about to tell them. Even if I made it as simple as this: we're going to dinner tonight at 6, meet me at Five Guys. Well, why are we going there? Which Five Guys are we going to? You can imagine, like, I was clear. We're going to be at dinner. Here's what time. Here's where we're going. But was it really that clear? No, it's clear to me. I know why we're going. I know how to get there. I know that we're meeting at Five Guys. I'm in Yuba City, California right now, meeting with a client. And I looked up Starbucks, and there's like 9 Starbucks within 5 minutes. I'm like, this is mind blowing to me, right? There are so many options. So don't assume just because it's clear to you that it's clear to them. Number 3, this is so obvious too, right? All of these are so profoundly obvious of human communication, but it's profoundly difficult to get right. The 7 reasons you think you're clear. Number 3, because you said it. Now you might say, I don't assume just because I said it that people understand. Oh, you and I do. Have you ever said, I already told them, but I said that last week, but Yes, you have. You said it in parenting. You said it in relationships. You said it if you're married. You've no doubt said it to your spouse. Remember, I told you. If you ever say, remember, I told you, well, they don't remember. They didn't get it. You said it, but it didn't stick. You think you're clear because you said it, but that's not always the case. In fact, I would say it's rarely the case. Often what you said is not what they heard. Because you said it, we already assumed I addressed this, they understand. Because I said it, it's going to stick, and that's just not the case. Number four, you assume that you're clear because no one asked questions. Man, this is so dangerous. Dangerous, dangerous. I was with a client last week in Texas, and they were debunking something because there was a lack of alignment. And one of the guys in the room said, do you know how we used to say that silence is agreement? Mm-hmm. And everyone kind of shook their head. He goes, that's not true. I'm like, you're right. It's not true. Silence is agreement. I heard that during the George Floyd uprising. I've heard that in meeting rooms. I've heard that last week with this client in Texas. And he goes, hey, just because I'm silent doesn't mean that I agree. And I totally agree that silence does not equal agreement. I don't think that's true. So imagine the room where you cast a vision, or you gave a direction, or you gave specific next steps. And whether or not you said this at the end, hey, does anyone have any questions? No one asked any questions. And sometimes you might say, make sense? Yeah, everybody's kind of nodding, but they're still processing. Don't, don't assume because everyone nods their head that they agree, or that they understand, or that there's clarity. Don't assume just because they ask questions or just because they did not ask questions that they understand. The hard work of clarity goes well beyond one meeting. Number five, this is like the after meeting, a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, maybe 6 months later. You have not heard that there's a lack of clarity, so you assume that you have it. Man, I've been so guilty of this. In fact, you're surprised when someone says, hey, I have a question, and they ask something that is completely contradictory to the culture that you're creating. Or they ask a question that you are 100% convinced that you were clear on, and that you understand, and that you assumed that they understood. And they didn't ask questions, and so you just wrongly assumed that they understood. The wrong assumption in number five is this: if there was a problem, they would tell me. You and I know as leaders, that's not true. Just because there's a problem doesn't mean that they're going to tell you. Number six, the 7 reasons you think you're clear. Number six is because they told you they understood. So sometimes they do say, yep, I get it. But what they got was something different than what you gave them. The ball that they caught was not the one that you threw. And this is so dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. The moment they say, yep, I got it. Yep, I understand. A day later, you find out that they didn't. A week later, you finally go, oh, they were clear, but they were clear on something that I didn't say or that I did not mean to say. Have you ever been into an argument or a tension in a relationship? We said, well, that's not what I meant to say. Well, that's not what I intended to say. We know the road to intentions never makes the progress that we want. But we often have to clean up our road of intention in the past. So just because someone says, I got it, doesn't mean that they do. And the hard work of leadership is going back and clarifying, and going back and clarifying again. And finally, number seven, the seventh reason that you think that you're clear is because everyone is excited and there's momentum. This one is most intriguing to me, because I'm going to debunk a quick assumption that momentum equals alignment. You would think, well, if things are going well, there's energy, there's momentum, we must all be aligned, right? Well, sometimes you hear from stage, or you might read in books, you might see on X or Instagram these quotes of like something like this: momentum equals alignment. In order for a team to grow, they have to be aligned. I would say that's not necessarily true at all. Do you know of any case studies and or organizations that grew in spite of there being this internal chaos? I could tell you some right now. I literally got off the phone early this morning with a nonprofit organization that is growing like crazy, but their internal staff is exploding. And if the people knew, and they don't right now, they will eventually. You could go to Enron, you could go to churches, you could go to businesses. Just because there's energy and a good culture and momentum does not mean there's clarity. There might be someone or a team or a division or a department making really good progress, but it's not in line with another department. It's not in line with the leader. And one day the balloon pops. So just because there's energy, just because I would check on that. Oh man, we're doing well, we're growing, things are good. Maybe, but maybe not. Always go back to the work of clarity and test it. Okay, now we understand the problems, we understand the assumptions, right? I'll recap these really quick. Just because you're clear doesn't mean they are clear. Just because it's clear to you doesn't mean it's going to be clear to them. And just because you said it doesn't mean that they received it. And just because they did not ask questions doesn't mean you were clear. And just because they haven't told you otherwise doesn't mean that you're aligned. And sometimes they tell you that they understand, number six, and they don't. And number seven, just because there's energy and momentum doesn't mean that there is clarity. All right, now you want to get to the future, right? I do have some solutions for you in just a moment, but I have four things that you can't forget about your team, because we can quickly try to say, well, okay, how do I make sure there's clarity? What steps can I take? What questions can I ask? What follow-ups can I take? How can I repeat myself as a leader to make sure that we do everything we can to find a place of alignment? We have a human challenge, and that human challenge is that we're all different, every single one of us. And there's never going to be a moment when what I say is always what the other person hears. So there's a human transfer that happens that we cannot forget. And I want to share four things that you can't forget about that transfer between you and your team. And if you pay attention to these, you will be in a very good position to overcome the obstacle. There's a Harvard professor by which name I am forgetting. It talks a lot about human communication and human strategy of communication. And he says, when you understand someone's opposition, you're in the best position to shatter it. So you have to understand their opposition, not before you overcome it. Most people try to overcome before they understand. It's like stepping into a room where you know it's going to be tense, you know it's going to be a tough meeting. Some of the meetings I've been facilitating over the past week in organizations have been tense in the organization. I'm like, hey, can we show up with questions and curiosity and not show up to this meeting with answers and solutions and finger pointing? So we cannot, it's in the same way, you can't forget this about your team in order to gain clarity. All right, here we go. Number one, this is so important to remember. Your team is constantly filtering what you say to them. Now you think, well, yeah, no doubt. Okay, I know you understand that, but let's talk about how they're filtering. Last week in this meeting, I decided to use this case study. I left a meeting with a client so optimistic, so optimistic. I thought the meeting went great. And about half the room thought it went great as well. But you know how the other half is. There's always the other half. And the more I listened as we debriefed this meeting, the more I felt the pain of what they were going through. Now, the reason I bring this example up is because someone that was sharing, I was like, okay, I'm remembering this, that someone in the room didn't think that the meeting went well because they were taking a cynical approach. Well, there's a reason that they were filtering everything in the room with cynicism. It's because they've been extremely hurt. The person in your organization that is hurting, and they're struggling. Maybe it's something at home with verbal abuse, physical abuse. Maybe it's a past pattern that they've been dealing with hurt. Maybe the person is used to a boss being too coercive or too domineering, or maybe the person has a history of of a pattern of leaving organizations where there's conflict, or maybe they personally just don't like conflict. Whatever the situation is, they're filtering it one way. And I was convinced, and I said in the meeting, I said, I know that you felt the meeting went different, but would you agree that kind of your filter is filtering through hurt? And they said, absolutely. I'm like, then I received what you're saying. At first, the meeting was almost like we were going to be disagreeing. No, the meeting went great. You can't tell the person that's hurting in the room, that's questioning more than you, that they shouldn't question. They're filtering. So just remember this. Some of your team is filtering through optimism. Some of your team is filtering through pessimism. Some of your team is filtering through doubt. Some of your team is jaded, cynical. Some are filtering in a way that is very, very, very alarming to the team. But just remember, it's not always your fault, but you have to remember that their filter is impacting what they hear. So if you remember this, if you remember that as a leader, you're communicating to multiple filters, it will change the way that you communicate. You can bring voice to certain things. I strongly encourage you to consider the filters in the room and make sure to speak to them. Sometimes it could be as easy as, hey, I know that some of you have been hurt in the past by this. And I want you to know that I recognize that. If you're a leader and you know that you've messed up, you could even say, I know that I dropped the ball and hurt your feelings last week because I dropped the ball. And for that, I'm sorry. Well, this week, I'm picking that ball up. You know that they're filtering through doubt, so speak to the doubt. So just don't forget that they're filtering, and their filter is not your filter. Okay, number two, I could go on that one for a long time. Some of these, I'm like, oh, we need a seminar just on that. All right, four things you can't forget about your team. Your team is always bringing their assumptions to the table. And likewise, assumptions shift meaning. People will always assume. Some are assuming the best, some are assuming the worst. Some are giving wrong motives. Some are assuming that you are giving a wrong motive. Some are implying, some are strategic. We could talk a long time just about this one too, but remember, the assumptions in the room are never aligned. If you have a team of 8, you have 8 different filters. If you have a team of 8, you have 8 different assumptions. I hope that there's alignment, but just because you said it doesn't mean that they receive it. And while I don't have do these 3 things to make sure you bring in the assumptions aligned, I don't have that, but I can just tell you this: pay attention. Pay attention to the assumptions in the room. And some of the steps that I'm going to give you here in just a few moments, I believe will help you work towards organizational clarity. But just remember, 8 people in the room, you have 8 filters. 8 people in the room, you got 8 assumptions. And they're bringing 8 assumptions to the table, and you're not always going to like what assumptions they come with. You ever asked a question and about, and you get an answer from someone on your team, you're like, no, 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 oh no, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, that's not what I meant. No, 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 that's not what I said. And it's just assumptions are on different pages. Work hard. Don't forget. Sometimes you were clear, but because of their assumption, it made it unclear. And so you have to speak to their assumptions. Like the Harvard strategist communicator said, you have to understand their assumptions. You have to understand their objections. You have to understand them in order to best shatter them, in order to best communicate. Number 3, 4 things you can't forget. Don't forget this. Your team is asking questions that they are unwilling to ask out loud. Sometimes this is because you have what we always say, a processor. You have someone processing, and you think that they're aligned, but they go home and they start reflecting, and they have a question. And then maybe they say, no, I don't want to seem like the doubter. I don't want to seem like the pessimist. I'm not going to ask. So what do they do with their question? They answer. Did you know this? People answer their own questions. In fact, this is why a Jewish approach to often teaching was asking questions. And every now and then someone will ask me a question. I'm like, how would you answer your own question? Almost every time I say, how would you answer your own question? I almost always love the answer. People are processing and they're answering their own questions, but that's when they get the wrong motive. That's when they assume the worst. That's when they're bringing the wrong assumption to the table. So just remember this: if you forget that they're asking questions, then we're going to fail to communicate, failure to launch. So don't forget Remember, just to recap this, they're constantly filtering what you say. They're constantly bringing their assumptions to the table, and they are asking questions. It might not be out loud, but they're asking them. And I guarantee you, they're answering them. Even the question I've had once, I remember a guy said, "Hey, how would you answer your own question?" He said, "I don't know. I mean, I really don't. That's why I'm asking you." I'm like, just give it a shot. Answer it. I don't remember the question, but I remember loving the answer. People are processing. They might not like their answer. They might not be confident of their answer, but most people ask a question and already have an answer. They might be wrong. They're curious on what you would say, but they're answering it. A great leader understands the questions that are being asked, both verbally and non-verbally, and they speak to them. Number 4, your team can simultaneously be flourishing and working without clarity. Now, I love to be, colloquial language would say, the devil's advocate, right? Even though faith is very important to me, I don't want to be the devil's advocate. What a funny thing that we say, but you get what I'm saying. Like, you have to fight on both sides. And I love saying things that maybe other people don't say, because you might hear this is another example of something you might read on a leadership quote. In order to flourish, your team must be aligned. I disagree. I've seen organizations flourish and grow when there's internal issues and challenges, because nothing's ever perfect. And in spite of sometimes the internal conflict, you can still sell your product. In spite of a lack of clarity, your team can still make progress. You can. And so the leader sometimes, because everyone comes in the room energetic, because there's momentum, as I said earlier, just because everyone's excited and there's momentum doesn't mean there's alignment. And so what we can assume, because everyone seems like they like their job, because everyone seems to be meeting their goals, because growth is happening, that there's clarity. All the while, what we might forget is that there's some internal angst, wrong assumptions, confusion. This is why the strat up process that we lead an organization is so powerful, because one of the first exercises that we lead a team through has 4 key questions that every organization must answer. And one of those is, what's confusing? What is confusing? One of the most alarming strategic planning sessions I've ever done is when I said that question, what is confusing? And the room could not answer. They couldn't answer the question. And that raised alarm in me. Because you know what it told me? They were fearful of giving the answer. And there was a massive leadership struggle. Massive. We tackled it. We did well. They did well, but they weren't willing to speak to the confusion. Okay. So your team can be flourishing on the outside and still be working without clarity. So just because things are heading in the right direction, so to speak, does it mean they're heading in the direction that everyone should be? 4 things you cannot forget about your team. So quick recap on these 4 things. Your team is filtering. Don't ignore their filters and study their filters. Learn how they're filtering. It will change the way that you communicate. Your team is bringing their assumptions to the table, and you might not like what they put on the table. Man, they are always bringing some assumptions. Might be right, might be wrong. Number 3, your team is asking questions. They might not be saying them out loud. Your job as a leader is to find out the questions they're asking so you can speak to them. Number 4, remember, you might see signs of flourishing, but it doesn't mean that there's complete clarity. Could be 1 employee, could be 2, could be across the board. But don't let growth fool you. Clarity might not be there. Finally, what I want to do is I want to share 4 rules for getting organizational clarity. 4 rules for getting organizational clarity, okay? Now, I love these, but this is where you have to say, what do I do with what I'm hearing? What do I do with some of these challenges? How do I take the very best next step? I don't know, but I know you can take some steps, okay? 4 rules for getting organizational clarity. Rule number 1, here we go. If you're not working ridiculously hard to communicate and maintain clarity, you simply don't have it. Let me say it again. If you're not working ridiculously hard to communicate and maintain the clarity, you simply don't have it. As I said at the beginning of our time together, I think one of the biggest challenges of leadership is providing clarity. It's really hard work. And the hard work most of the time happens before the meeting. It's either a one-on-one meeting or a group meeting. Even as I thought about this and I've been preparing the last couple of days, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I be really, really, really clear? How do I make sure every point is simple? How do I make sure every story connects? How do I not bring my wrong assumptions to the table, but more pose questions for you? Like it's really hard to make sure that you're clear. And this should be one of your biggest jobs. One of your biggest jobs is to communicate with clarity. And remember, clarity always happens after the meeting. It's not just communicating clearly, but it's maintaining it. And it's repeating and repeating and repeating. And it's asking questions. But if you're not working really hard on this, if you said, yeah, we're pretty clear in our organization, now you probably don't have it. But if you're like, man, all I do is work on clarity. All I do is remind people. All I do is come alongside and ask questions. Man, this is what I do. I provide our ministry, our organization, our business with clarity. It's a constant battle. So let me encourage you, keep the boxing gloves on. It is a constant battle. So keep those gloves on. If you take your eye off of clarity, you'll crash 100% of the time. If you take your eye off of clarity, you will crash 100% of the time. No different than driving down the road. What are the chances that you crash if you don't watch the road? Well, what is it you're looking for? You can work on the product, refining the product, testing the product, getting it to market. Yeah, you might sell it, but you won't sell it for long if you don't have clarity and alignment. So I don't know what business you're in. I don't know what field you're in, what your mission is, and what your avenue is, what your product is. But I can just tell you, as a leader of a team, as a leader of an organization, now as a leader who coaches leaders, the work of clarity is your work. So if you're not working really, really, really hard to maintain it, you don't have it. Because you will always work the rest of your life to maintain clarity, to communicate clarity, and to maintain it. Number two, never assume. This is speaking to what I said earlier. Please, 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 never assume that silence communicates understanding and agreement. Never assume that silence communicates understanding and agreement. Now you say, well, how do I get it? Well, don't live with the assumption that everyone's aligned. So what do you do from here? You ask questions. And when you're tired of asking questions, you're probably just getting started. Don't assume that silence communicates understanding. And don't assume that silence communicates agreement. I think this is when you not just over a board meeting, but coffee conversations, phone calls, text messages, one-on-ones in your office, work trips. You ask questions. And you ask if people disagree. Hey, who sees it differently? One of the best questions I had when I led an organization as CEO, I would ask this almost quickly: who sees it differently? Who sees it differently? Come on, let's talk. I see it one way, but let's be real. You guys see it differently because you're human, and that's okay. Giving permission for someone to communicate, I see it differently, boss. I see it, Lee. I see it differently. That's powerful. That is powerful. And if we have this yes man culture where we can't disagree with the leader, it's not going to last. So you have to fight hard to understand what your people understand. You have to fight hard to make sure they communicate where they don't agree, where they see it differently, so that you can speak to assumptions, so that you can speak to a lack of alignment. Make it your job to do everything you can to make sure that the silence is broken. I spoke earlier about an organization that could not speak and would not speak out loud initially to what was confusing because they didn't want to offend the leader. The other thing is, I found out about a month later after attending one of their meetings that the leader was the only one that spoke in the room. And it was scary. And that leader is no longer with the organization. But I found out that that leader, it was his way or the highway. It was his voice or no voice. And it was a toxic culture. So as a leader, hopefully, if that's you, you're probably not on the call. If that's you, you're probably not listening and learning on clarity because maybe you think you already have it, but you have to work hard to break the silence in the room and be willing to listen. All right. Number three, the third rule for getting clarity. Make sure it is your job description to get every single one of the people that directly report to you to have full clarity on the mission and their part in the mission. Oh, so loaded, but I'm telling you, this is your job. It's not part of your job. I'm just going to tell you, it is your job. If you send me your job description, or even in a coffee conversation, you tell me what it is you're doing in your organization, I'm telling you, your job, if you have direct reports, part of your job will be 100% to make sure that they understand why we exist. That's mission. That's a mission definition in our world at the Barzel Group. What is the mission? It's why you exist. Tell me why you exist. Tell me why you started a business. Tell me why you started a nonprofit. Tell me why your church exists. Tell me what it is. What are you doing? Why do you exist? Why do you wake up every day and go to work? And then what is your part in it? If you're really, really, really clear on that, especially your part of it, right? If you don't understand the mission or your role in it, you eventually will find yourself another job because it's going to be chaos. But as a leader, if you're leading a team, it is your job to make sure everyone that answers to you understands the mission of the organization and exactly what role they play in it. There was a business I worked with a couple of years ago. I had about 70 employees. One of my initial interview conducts with the organization, it was over 50%. It wasn't like 90%, but over 50% of the employees said, I need clarity on my role. I thought, oh my gosh, let's just say it was like maybe 40 out of 70. That's pretty close of people said that. 40. Imagine if you led a team of 70 and 40 of them said, I need clarity on what I'm actually doing. This organization was spending millions because there's 40 people. They're spending millions of dollars in staff. And over half of them said they don't know what they're doing. It's not written down. There wasn't clarity. Now, it's interesting enough, this organization was an incredible culture to work in, incredible leaders, and they were making incredible profit. But 40, roughly, out of 70 something employees, it was over half, said, I need clarity on my job. I would say that's no good. We did work on that, by the way. We solved that problem. Number four, if it's not written down, it's going to lack clarity. I can't tell you, this drives me bonkers. I'm so fired up right now, I can't even read the rest of what I wrote down. Let me just read it. If it's not written down, it is going to lack clarity. And I would say if something deserves clarity, it deserves pen and paper. Write it down. I'm not like an all caps person. You know, when a boss or someone sends an email in all caps, you're like, come on, that's not professional. In my personal notes, I write it down in all caps like 3 times. It's not here in this presentation, but write it down. I can't tell you how many times in my client work that I say, hey, I got a question. That policy you just told me about, is that written down? Hey, I have a question. That what you just told me about, like your spending procedures and receipt reimbursement, is that written down? Is that written down? Hey, you're frustrated with that employee because they're not clear on the role. Is their role written down? Is that written down? Is that written down? I have asked that question, I don't know how many times, but I've said it a lot. And you know what the answer is more times than no? More times than not, it's no. Or someone says, well, I think it is. I'm telling you, I think it is. Hey, you're frustrated that they're not doing this in their job. Is that written down in their job description? And most leaders say, I don't, that's a good question. Let me go back and look at their job description. You get the point. If it's not written down, it's going to lack clarity. And if something deserves clarity, it deserves pen and paper. You have to write it down. Now, just because it's written down doesn't mean it's going to be clear to the team, but at least that's a starting point for crying out loud. A friend of mine is a chaplain for the New England Patriots, and just learning about the Patriots and learning about my friend and his role and his influence in that organization, growing up just a respect from a distance over these 3 words. And the 3 words are, known by Bill Belichick, now the head coach at the University of North Carolina. But when you'd go to Gillette Stadium, you would see this on signs, you'd see this on posters, you'd see it on the stadium, but it was also the marker of their culture. Do your job. Do your job. That's what Bill Belichick was known for saying, was known for living, and he developed that culture within his coaching staff. He developed that culture among his players. Now you think, oh, doesn't every head coach do that? If you're a high school soccer coach, don't you say, hey, do your job? Of course, yeah, do your job. But let's talk about this. How are you supposed to do your job if you're not really clear? And Bill Belichick and a friend of mine also worked for Steve Spurrier when he was at University of South Carolina. He was like, well, if the players aren't doing their job, it's my fault. It's true, isn't it? The work of a leader is to make sure they know their job. And if they don't know their job, then take ownership of it. Make sure they know their job. And if it's not written down, and I go back to football, if the X's and the O's aren't clear, as long as you know your exact job, your job is to just do that job. And if it's not written down, it's like, could you imagine being in the NFL and not having a playbook? You don't know the X's and the O's. You don't know if you're a wide receiver, you're a slot wide receiver. You don't know where to start on this play. It'd be mayhem. There's no way to make progress if it's not clear. Just like you don't call a timeout and say, "All right, guys, let's go for the end zone this time." Wait. Who? Wide receiver? Do I do an out route? Do I do a hook and ladder? Is this a Hail Mary? What's the play? What do I do? Imagine the 70 employees and over 40 of them say, I don't know what I'm doing. That's incredible. But it's true. We're all guilty of it. So we are here to help you. Number one, if you're not working ridiculously hard to maintain clarity, you don't have it. So I'd say something else, some other balls need to drop so you can pick up this one because it's hard. Never assume that silence communicates understanding and agreement. It's just not true. So work hard to unearth silence. Number three, make sure it's your job to get every single person that answers you to understand the mission and their role in it. I mean, it is your job. It's not part of your job. It's your job. And if it's not written down, it does. I used to say this to my team. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. Now I know what I said here. If it's not written down, it's going to lack clarity. And if it deserves clarity, it deserves pen and paper. Write it down. Thank you. I'm going to look at some questions here in just a moment, but I want to say this thank you. BarzelGroup.com. Here's my email. Here's my cell phone number. We would love to be of assistance to you. We also would love to I'd love to offer you a 45-minute free consultation. I'd love to spend time with you. I would love to get to know you, hear about you, your organization, and what your needs are. We love leaders, as I said at the very beginning of the conversation, and we absolutely, I'm going to stop my screen share. We absolutely love coming alongside leaders and helping them. All right, I'm actually going to answer one of the questions. Let me read a couple of the questions that are here in our last few moments together. Jason, we've got teams across 3 locations plus remote workers. Even when I think I'm crystal clear in our all hands meeting, each location seems to interpret things differently. Yes, been there, done that. How do you create clarity when you can't be in the room with everyone? Okay, great. That's such a phenomenal question. I've had that challenge of leading remote workers around the world. I've had that challenge of being in. I've done some work in a nonprofit that had 7 locations. I get it. I would say this, that ball is going to drop because as you play the elephant game, you pass along a sentence around the room. Isn't that what it's called? You pass the sentence along the room and it changes by the time it gets down to everyone. I would say there's 2 things to make sure that you do. Number one is the organizational structure. The person that has the lead microphone at that organization must be in proximity together. For instance, if there's a manager at all 3 locations, if those managers, I've asked this question, if those managers are not meeting weekly together, you're going to have chaos. So I would say look at your structure. Make sure that the structure lends itself to really good communication. A once a month meeting ain't going to cut it. They've got to be in proximity. They've got to spend time together. So I'd say consider your structure. Sometimes the structure itself is the problem. But to your question, you said, I'm really clear in our all hands meeting. Each location seems to interpret things differently. The job of the meeting and the leader in the meeting is to make sure to follow up with the meeting after the meeting. Because you know what happens after the meeting. You think that you're clear, and then you start seeing the deliverables and what happens next, and you're not clear. So I would say follow up, follow up, follow up. And I would say, let's say you have a Monday staff meeting, and by Thursday you haven't followed up, it's not going to be good. I would just say you have to establish a follow-up system. In fact, one of our future webinars is going to be the power of the follow-up, the power of the follow-up and the follow-through. It cannot be. The meeting is never sufficient. That's another thing I like to say. The meeting is never sufficient. Some people think the meeting covers it all, but the meeting is never sufficient. So I would say they have to be in proximity, and you have to have constant follow up and follow through. Hey, we talked about making sure this was addressed. How is it going? Hey, I've been saying this at my team with my team. Is this what you're also saying? No, I've been saying it this way. If you're following up with questions, following up with curiosity, you can nail the issue. So structure, consider the structure and consider the power of the follow through. The next question: how do you know when you've crossed from clarity into just creating noise? That's a great question. I would want to ask you that answer if you're still in the meeting, because I'm not really sure exactly where that's going to. I'm going to interpret it. I'm actually going to be guilty of bringing my assumption to the table, what we talked about in this meeting. I'm assuming what you're meaning is that you are giving so much clarity, it's just white noise. I would say you're not going to know that until you ask the questions. I'd say you got to go to your team. I think you got to go to your team and start asking them questions. Hey, tell me about what you heard. Tell me, I'm not just going to say, does this make sense? But can you tell me what you think you're going to do with what you've heard? Oh, yeah, it totally makes sense. I'm going to go tell my team. I'm going to. Um, and I think you could also ask them, and especially the trusted advisors on your team, the people that you look to for counsel, and say, hey, are we giving too much information? Are we not giving enough? Because you know, some people in your organization, they want more information, not less. Some people just say, I got it. I got it. You've repeated it. You've told us already. I don't need anything else. And so I think it's going to be very situational. And I think it's going to be super, super dependent upon the person. Those are the questions. If there's anything else, we would love to help you. I shared the QR code in the meeting. Would love to learn about what you're experiencing. Would love to learn about what you're going through. Would love to help you. Here at the Barzel Group, we exist to do these four things. Speaking of clarity, we provide strategic planning for organizations. Why? Because organizations want clarity about where they're headed and why they're headed there. If we can be of assistance to you in clarifying your future through strategy, we'd love to help. The second thing is we do the same thing for one-on-one individuals. It's called the life plan. Not only do organizations want clarity, but individuals want clarity. So we have a 2-day intensive with follow-up coaching called the life plan. Third thing we do is executive coaching one-on-one. It's just one-on-one leadership. Every leader needs a leader. Every coach needs a coach. Every mentor needs a mentor. Every guide needs a guide. So we do executive coaching. The first thing we do is work with leadership teams, the leadership circles. We come alongside leadership teams to help them grow and develop and provide the coaching and resources necessary to grow leaders from with him. If there's anything we can do at the Barzel Group to encourage you, to coach you, to help you, I'd love to hear from you. And just know, stay tuned via LinkedIn and also on all of our social media platforms. We'd love to connect with you at the Barzel Group. Send us questions that you have. We would love to connect. We're going to be doing monthly webinars, and we look forward to continuing to provide encouragement, provide value, and provide inspiration for your days ahead. Thank you for being with us. This is the end of our webinar, and may you be blessed and may you be joyous in the work. Remember, work hard for clarity. I think it's one of the greatest challenges that you and I have today is to provide clarity to the people that we lead, and you'll never be finished. So do not get tired of the work of clarity, because you'll never arrive, and all the work of the challenge will always be in front of us. But just don't forget this: there's a lot of joy in store when you're clear and when you're aligned. Why? Because it's going to add fuel to your mission and fuel to your future. All right. Be blessed. Hope you guys have a good day. Thank you once again for joining us in this webinar from the Barzel Group.